Hello everybody, welcome to another video from ArcGIS Associates, now part of the Davie Resource Group. So today we want to talk about subtypes and domains. You know, GIS is a great tool for helping us answer all kinds of questions, solve problems, manage assets, and a whole lot more. But like any other data-driven system, it's only as good as the data it contains. So if you've got garbage going into it, you're going to get garbage coming out of it. So what can we do to ensure that the data we're inputting into our GIS, that we're using to perform the analysis that we do, to manage the assets that we do, and so on, what do we do to ensure that it is good, that it's not garbage? And that's really a great question, and one we really ought to ask ourselves all the time, right? How do we do that? So that's what we want to kind of talk about today, is what tools are available to make that happen. So when we're looking at our GIS and talking about data, we need to remember that in most cases, our data consists of two components, right? We have the spatial component, what we see in the map. And then we have the attribute component, all of the information about what we're seeing in the map and the associated characteristics of the data, right? So it's important when we're talking about keeping our GIS clean and accurate and up to date and current and all those things, that we keep both parts or both components of that data in check, right? That we validate it to make sure that we don't have garbage going in, so we're not getting garbage coming out. And it's equally important to look at both sides of this equation, right? We need to keep both sides of the data clean and accurate and current because we do analysis on both sides, right? We do spatial analysis with the spatial data, and we're going to do all kinds of queries and other analysis based on the attribute data. So it's critical that we maintain both of those. And there are a lot of different tools within ArcGIS that supports data validation, data quality, whatever you want to call it. If we're looking on the spatial side, we have snapping, right? So as you're editing data, actually snapping features together to make sure they're connected. We've got topology, that modeling of spatial relationships between features. Are they connected, adjacent, coincident, so on? So we've got that we can use in ArcGIS, whether it's a map topology or geodatabase topology. We can set up relationship classes in the database so that this feature is connected to this feature. So if I move one, another one moves with it. We can build networks, whether they're geometric networks or the newer trace network that's with ArcGIS Pro. That, as well as if you have a network analyst extension, you can use that. We have things like the utility network and the parcel fabric. All of these include tools and rules and things that allow us to ensure that the spatial data is as correct as we can possibly make it. On the attribute side, there are a lot of different ways we can do that. First off is when we create a field in an attribute table, define the field type. Is it a text field, a date field, a numeric field, and so on, so that we don't enter in the wrong type of data to start with. So that's one way we can help validate or ensure better consistent data is entered. We have subtypes and domains, and that's what we're going to get into here in just a moment to explain those. We can also use relationship classes within the geodatabase so that this field is linked to this other field and can copy. If we change the value here, it changes the value over there. With ArcGIS Pro and Portal for ArcGIS and all that, we can also assign attribute rules. And these can be validation rules, they can be calculation rules, and so on, so that if I put some value in here, it does something over there, right? And we can add those. We can also have contingency values, something that's new in Arc Pro and whatnot, where to have this value, I've got to have this other value, right? And again, we're not going to focus on that. What we really want to focus on in this video, and we'll talk about the others in later videos, is these subtypes and domains, because those have been around for a long time in ArcGIS, and so that's where we're going to kind of focus on right now. So we're going to go ahead and start with subtypes. So what a subtype is, it's a way of grouping features in a single feature class or table. So I'm going to highlight that. This works in a feature class or a table. And I should add, this also only works inside of a geodatabase. You cannot do this with shape files or CAD files or whatnot. This only works inside of the Esri geodatabase. So subtypes allow me to create these subcategories or classifications of features within a single feature class. And you're thinking, well, why would I want to do that? What's the purpose of being able to create these subcategories as you were within a single feature class? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. First, I may have different default values depending on the classification or the group that a certain feature is in. So you can see here on the slide, I've got an example where I have a streets layer, a streets feature class, right? Well, depending on who owns the street, is it a local street, a state highway, a federal highway, a privately owned road, I may have different values for things like the type of asphalt that's used, right? Or I'm sorry, the type of pavement that's used. So for a local street, most often is probably paved with asphalt, whereas it's a state highway, it may be more often paved with concrete, right? So again, by separating those, I can assign different default values in the table when somebody's editing data, which allows for greater consistency and accuracy when people are adding new roads. Same thing with like the number of lanes. A local road, a city road might only be typically 2 lanes, whereas a state highway may be 5 lanes, right? So again, assigning those. So that gives you one example of why I might want to do that. The other thing I can do with a subtype is assign different topology rules. So remember, topologies are that spatial model of data. Are they connected, adjacent, coincident with one another? So I might have a rule on a local road that says local roads must not intersect. What that means is where they cross, there must be a breakpoint there at that intersection. Whereas a state highway may cross over a local road, but it's not broken. There's no on ramps, off ramps, right? There, it could be just a bridge going over. So I may not want to assign that rule, roads must not intersect, to a state highway, because that may be perfectly acceptable. So I can do that with subtypes as well, assign different topology rules on that. Okay. Now, the one thing to remember, or a couple of things I should say to remember when talking about subtypes, is first, this is going to be a property of the feature class or the table where you're assigning this. So you're actually going to go into the properties of that feature class or table to set up and configure the subtypes. The other part of that is you must use an integer field. Okay, so when you're looking at the attribute table, creating the field you're going to use for your subtype, it must be an integer field. It cannot be a text field, it cannot be a date field, it cannot be a blob field. It must be an integer. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a long or short integer, either one will work, but it's got to be an integer field. And I'll demo this here in just a moment, both how you can set this up in ArcMap, ArcCatalog, as well as ArcGIS Pro, because this applies in all of those applications. So now let's talk about domains. Okay? These are often referred to or thought of more as the pick lists, but it's not just limited to pick lists. In ArcGIS, whether it's Pro or the older ArcMap, ArcCatalog, a domain is one of 2 types. It's going to be a range domain or a coded values domain. Which you want to use will depend on a couple of things. One is the field type you're working with, and then 2 is what are you trying to do with the field, right? So a range domain can only be assigned to numeric fields. So it's got to be a short integer, a long integer, a float, a single, those types of numeric fields, right? And what you do is you assign a range, right? It can go from this number to this number. From 1 to 100, 500 to 1,000. And then you can validate that domain against your data and find any entries that are wrong. The other one is the coded values, and that's more like your typical pick list. You're going to define a list of acceptable values, and when the user goes to edit data that has a domain assigned, they're going to be presented with that list of values you've created, and they can only pick from that list. Okay, so there are a few things to remember with this. First off, your domain and the field you're going to match it with must match. Meaning, If you create a domain that's for text, it's got to be a text field. If you create a domain that's specific numeric values, like say pipe sizes, right? Then if you set up the domain as a float for a float field, then again, the pipe diameter must be a float field as well. So we've got to set that up. And this is also a property of the geodatabase. When you create domains, it's going to make it a property of the geodatabase. And the reason is then you can use the domain across the entire database. So subtypes are limited to a specific feature class or table, whereas the domain is usable across the entire database. You're thinking, well, why would I want to do that? Well, for example, here on the slide, you can see I have a domain called condition, right? Which is the inspection condition of a feature. Well, whether it's good, fair, poor, or unknown could apply to any feature. It could be a road I'm talking about. It could be a fire hydrant. It could be a building. It could be a power pole, a transformer, segment of pipe, whatever, right? So why would I want to create multiple domains that would have the same values for each one of those feature classes or tables when I can create one once and then use it throughout? And again, I'll demonstrate this here in just a second so you can understand what I'm talking about, right? So all of these allow me to limit data entry and kind of confine what users are able to put in there to, again, ensure consistency and hopefully reduce the number of errors. Again, as we'll see in just a moment. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into, I think we'll go ahead and start with ArcCatalog, which is probably what most people are familiar with at this point. And then I'm going to also show you how to do some of these same things in ArcGIS Pro, because subtypes domains, they apply in both situations, whether you're still using the older ArcMap and ArcCatalog, or if you've moved into the Pro environment. And I just want to make sure you know where to go configure these things. So I'm going to jump over to there now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start us here in ArcCatalog. Now remember, whether you're talking about adding subtypes or domains, you're talking about making schema changes. So you're making changes to the structure of your database. So that's important. So you're going to want to do this if you're in the older ArcCatalog, ArcMap environment, in ArcCatalog or the catalog window in ArcMap, and I can show you both places to do that. Also, if you're working in SDE, then you want to make sure all database connections are off, all versions have been posted and reconciled, and all those kind of things before you start making these types of changes, and any pending data edits have also been saved and dealt with. So, okay, so now we're getting on, and let's start with, say, a domain. So we'll start with domains. I think they're easier to understand before we get into subtypes. So first thing I'm going to do is go through my folder connections. I'm going to expand my connection to my folder here. Okay, and so here we go. Here is our database we're working with. This is a file geodatabase. Again, it doesn't matter. Same techniques generally apply whether you're working in an SDE database or even if you're still in the older personal geodatabase. Which is a side note, if you are in personal geodatabases, I recommend you start porting over to file geodatabases because Esri is slowly dropping support for those personal geodatabases. But anyway, so let's get back in here. So if I want to create a domain for some of the data that I have in here, again, it could be inspector names, it could be condition, it could be pipe sizes, pipe material, whatever you want to create. You're going to go to the geodatabase right here and right click on it and go to properties, because remember, domains are properties of the geodatabase. So you can see here I've got it, and there's a tab next to the general called domains. This is where you're going to go in and create any new domains that you want to have in your database. Okay? So you can see I already have two here. I've got condition and I have pipe material. Okay? If I want to create a new one, I'm just going to go down here to the next line and say this is going to be a range domain. So for pipe sizes, so I'm going to go pipe underscore size. Again, you want to keep in the domain name, you cannot have special characters. Then we'll put in a description. Acceptable pipe sizes. Then I'm going to go down here and choose, the field type. So we do know that pipe sizes can vary. There can be fractional pipe sizes potentially, but say we're going to enter in pipe sizes in inches or centimeters, whatever you're at. I'm in the US, so I'm going to go with inches. So that should still be a short integer. Okay, so we're going to set it to short integer. Yes, we're going to keep it a range. So this is where you'd pick range or coded value. So I'm going to go range. I'm going to say the minimum pipe size is certainly not going to be 0. Say we have 4 inches is the minimum. And then the maximum for what we're doing will be 48 inches. Okay, so we got that. Next, we're going to choose our split and merge policy. So this is if we take an existing pipe and we split it, we cut it, into 2 pieces or more. What happens with the values for the field that this domain is assigned to? Does it keep the default value for that field? Does it calculate some geometric ratio in this case because it's a numeric field, or do we just duplicate it? So we're going to set to duplicate. And then the merge. If I merge 2 features together, what happens? Does it sum the 2 values together? Does it do an average weighted value? Again, because we're dealing with numbers. If this was coded values with a text field, it would be different options here. I'm going to keep the default value because if I merge 2 pipes, it doesn't necessarily change the diameter, so I don't want to sum that. And I don't want to do an average weight, so I'm just going to keep the default value there. Okay, and that's all I've got to do. I don't have any coded values to enter because this is a range domain. So I'm going to click apply. And now it's added that domain here to my geodatabase. So if I want to actually assign this domain to a feature class, now that I've created it, I'm going to go OK to that. Then say go to my sewer lines, open its properties, go to the Fields tab, and if I have a size, well, I have a size that's a float, so that wouldn't be acceptable. So I'm going to create a new field called, we'll call it diameter, and I think we made that a short integer, right? And so you can see down here the properties associated with the field. And I'm going to go ahead and pick my domain. There's the pipe size domain I just created, and I can now apply that. Okay. So there we've applied the domain. And if I go into ArcMap and I say bring in the, was it the water lines I was looking at? Sewer lines. Yep, sewer lines. Okay, so I'm bringing in the sewer lines in here. And what happens when I go to edit, I'll start my edit session, pick a sewer line, open the attribute pane. Let's let the catalog pane minimize for a second, bring this out so you can see it. Okay. So now when I go in here, I can enter in a value. To validate my features, all were valid. So now I'm good. Okay. So that's the way that's going to work. So let's go in now and show you a similar process, but in, say, ArcGIS Pro, because it works a little bit differently. Okay, so in Arc Pro, if I want to create domains, it works a little bit differently. So first off, you're going to have already created your feature class that you want to create the domain that it's primarily going to be associated with, right? And when I select that, if I go up here to the data tab, and there's more than one way to do this. I'm just going to show you what I find to be the easiest, fastest way to do that. So I've got it selected. You'll notice up here, once I go to the data tab, there's a domains button here. So I can click on that. And then from here, I can go in and start adding in a new domain. So maybe I'm going to have a list of inspectors, right? So I'm going to call it INSP_name. Give a description of that. And yes, it's going to be a text field that we're going to work with. It's a coded values domain. Again, the split and merge policies here. Again, because we're dealing with text, different options. Okay. With that, I'm going to minimize this a little bit or resize it. Then I'm going to go here and create the codes, right, for the inspectors' names, right? And you could actually, because it's a text field, you can spell it out. Put abbreviations, so I'm going to put in some abbreviations, and then the description will be the full name. And again, you kind of get the idea. Here. And keep in, and then I always like to put in a fallback, the other. Okay. With all that, we should be good to go. Now that I've entered those, they're all green. This is green. Notice the save button is up here. So I can click save. And now that domain is available in the database. So when I go back here to streets, go to data, I'm going to go to fields now. So this is the list of fields. And again, I don't have an inspector name in here for the streets. I can add one. Notice the field name, I've just called it inspector. I'm not going to change the alias in there. Text field. I'm going to shorten it from 255 down to, say, 25. Should be good enough. Go enter. And then I can now go here and assign the domain. There's the one I just created. I'm going to assign it. Now I'm going to hit save. That. Okay. And then I go back to my map here. And if I go to edit and my select tool, I'm going to select a road segment here. Open the attributes over here. So when I go down to the inspector, there's the pick list, right? I can say this was inspected by Trip Corbin. Okay. So that's, how you can create subtypes within and use them within both ArcMap and ArcCatalog and ArcGIS Pro. And I can also then use that same domain. So again, with the water lines, assuming I have the same inspectors, verify I don't have that on there. So I'm going to open my fields view again, add a new field, call it inspector. Again, it's going to be a text field. And then when I go back here to domains, again, see, there's that list, right? There's the condition that was already there, pipe materials, inspector name, and make it, again, I don't like having fields too long. Okay. And click off till the save button comes up, which is not going to come up because I have edits that haven't been saved. Oh, let me go back to the map. That's why I'm not there. Let me save those edits. Now those edits, with those edits saved, this is now available to me to save the change I did there. Okay. So in Arc Pro, you can't change, and this is true of ArcMap and ArcCatalog too, you can't make changes to the schema of the database, which assigning domains, creating fields, all of that are schema changes if there's pending data edits that haven't been saved. So that's why that button was grayed out to start with. Okay, so there we go. We've got the basics of domains and how those work. So now let's talk about subtypes and how we set those up. And I'm going to show you how to do that first in Arc Pro, and then we'll jump over back in ArcMap and ArcCatalog. Okay, so the process isn't that much different from what we had with domains if you're in Arc Pro. I'm going to have map open or project open. I'm going to go up to data here, and then you'll notice there is a subtypes button. So again, say I want to create that ownership subtype so I can assign different domains as we were talking about in the slide presentation. So I'm going to go here to subtypes. I'm going to click create and manage subtypes, and from here I would pick a field, right? Well, right now there is no good field to use. None of these, the speed limit, number of lanes, from and to addresses don't work. So before I create the subtype, I've got to create a field that works with that. And remember, to create a subtype, it must be an integer field. Okay, so we're going to cancel this and go back to the fields for my fields view for my street attribute table. And go ahead and create a new field. I'll just call it owner type. See? Give it an alias. Again, it can be a long or short integer. I'm going to go with short integer because I don't expect values to be very high. They're going to be something between 0 to 10, maybe 0 to 20, well within the range of a short integer. And short integers perform slightly better than long integers. So that's good. I don't need to change anything there. Just click over here, and now I'm going to click save. Okay, so I've got my new field that I'm going to use for my subtype delineation defined here. Now I'm going to go back to the subtypes tab that I had opened from the data. Remember, I had just gone to the data tab, click subtypes, and it opened this one. But I'm already here. So go back here, create manage button there, pick my field that I just created. There we go. And now I'm going to put in, basically like we did with coded values domain, I'm going to put in values. But remember, these are going to be numeric. So anything that's a 0 is going to be, say, a city road. Enter. And come down to here. And go, anything that's a 1 is going to be a county road. Enter. Anything that's a 2 is going to be a state-owned road. Anything that's a 3 is going to be a federal road, federally owned road. 4 would be anything that is a private road. And then 5 would be other. Okay. So now notice if you're pointing this to a field that already has data in it, you can click discover codes. It would go ahead and pre-populate that. But this is a brand new field we created. It has no value, so that doesn't help us. So we're going to click OK to this. Then notice what it's done, right? It's created a series of columns for each of the subtypes we created. Right there is the city, county, state, federal, private, and other. So we could go in and assign different domains. So if it's a city-owned road, if I had a different pavement type domain, I could pick it from here versus a separate domain for a county-owned road. So I can define each one of these differently, okay, based on the subtype. Okay, so I could go in and populate those. Maybe I want to go ahead and put the condition domain to the city roads because those are the ones I'm going to be updating, and maybe the others I'm not. So I'm only apply it to this subtype. Okay. Once I've gone in and configured all those, I'm going to click Save, and now it's going to create those subtypes within the streets feature class so that I can then leverage that. So I'm going to close all this down. You just go ahead and create a topology like I was talking about where we assign different rules based on subtypes. So I'm going to go over here really quickly into my geodatabase in this feature data set and go New Topology. So this is going to create my new topology. And topology name is fine. I'm going to accept all this. I'm going to go ahead and add the one and only feature class that's in there and go next. I'm going to add a new rule, and notice we've got a feature class 1 and subtype 1 and then rule and feature class 2 subtype 2. So this is where I said I can go ahead and add the rule. I'm going to choose the streets feature class. I'm going to go ahead and choose whatever subtype. So I'm going to do this on the city subtype. And then I'm going to click rule here and choose the rule. So in this case, it's city roads, so they must not intersect. Again, where they cross, there must be a break, which makes perfect sense for a city style road. Okay. And go, well, I could go in and add additional rules. So I could, add one, again, to the streets. In this one, I could apply to, say, the state roads in that subtype and do a different rule. Let's see here, must not self-overlap. Okay. So again, you can see where I can keep applying different rules, topology rules, to my spatial data based on that subtype. Whatever it happens to be. I can keep adding those in there, right? So there's no limit to the number of rules each subtype can have. I can keep going in there. I keep going next, check my summary, and hit finish. Okay, so it then creates that topology with those spatial rules applied to the data, and then of course I could validate the topology and all those kind of things like we would traditionally do when working with a topology. So now we have the topology created, the rules assigned, all based on subtypes. So really hope this is helping you see the value and the power of subtypes. So with that, let's go ahead and jump over into ArcMap and take a look. Okay, so we're here in ArcMap now. I'm going to do this here. It works the same as in ArcCatalog, but I'm going to go through the catalog window in ArcMap to create and set up my subtypes here, or show you where you would do that. So we're in the catalog window. I've expanded my folder connections. If you were in SDE, you would go to your database connections down here to get into that, to set this up. But because I'm using a file geodatabase, I'm going to go through folders. And again, instead of going to the database, a subtype's a property of the feature class. So if I wanted to create a subtype on say the manholes, don't really know why I'd create a subtype on manholes. I'm just going to right click on that feature class, open the properties. As you see here, I would go to the subtypes tab. And again, I would pick the subtype field. I just happen to have one, meters. If I didn't have one, I could go back to the fields tab and create it over here. Remember, it's got to be an integer. And then again, I could go through and start defining those. And then I would start defining different default values and domains here, just like I was doing in ArcGIS Pro, right? So there's the condition domain, right? If I had a specific basin that this was in, I could pick that as well, or just define it here. So again, I can go in and set those up, the different subtypes this point. Also note I brought my center lines in for the streets, and look, it created the symbology for each of the subtypes available. Now this is important because when you do have subtypes, it is for domains and things to work, you must actually have features populated with the appropriate subtype in there. So now this would mean any new data, if I were to start editing here and open my create features window. I'm sorry, create feature, yeah, window, I'm in ArcMap, right? So now I would be able to pick, if I had a new road that was a new city road that was in here, right? It's automatically picking up that subtype. So if I open the attribute window, you can see that the owner type is city, and then any of the defaults I would have put in there for that would have picked up here. Okay, so again, you saw I created subtype in Arc Pro, but ArcMap recognized it here as well. So like I said, just highlighting that subtypes and domains work cross-platform with that, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring them to your attention and show you kind of how they work. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of how to create these and what they do and how they work within both ArcMap, ArcCatalog, and ArcGIS Pro. So remember, you know, if you do need some help, we are here, EGIS Associates, now part of the Davie Resource Group. We can provide you with GIS consulting services, whether it's implementing enterprise GIS, just getting started with GIS, you know, integrating GIS with other solutions like asset management, utility billing, customer management systems, you name it. If you need help strategic planning or doing needs assessments, so maybe you're looking to migrate from on-premises servers to cloud-based servers, we can certainly help you with that. We have experience both with Azure and Amazon, and of course Esri's ArcGIS Online Cloud. We can work with all of that. Maybe you just need some technical assistance. You don't have enough staff for current projects and need a technician or an analyst to help you out. Or maybe you need some just tech support on an existing implementation you already have. We can help you with that. And of course, just general training and support as a whole, whether you're looking to learn more about ArcGIS Pro or even the older ArcMap, ArcCatalog, working with ArcGIS Online or any of the other Esri product lines, we can certainly help you with that. And we can possibly help you with some AutoCAD training too. Now with our relationship as part of Davie Resource Group, we have access to AutoCAD instructors, whether it's plain Jane AutoCAD or Map 3D, Civil 3D, those kind of things. We can help you out with that too. So, of course, I don't want to forget to plug my newest book, ArcGIS Pro 2. It's the second edition of my first Learning Arc Pro book. So this incorporates all the new changes that are up to ArcGIS Pro 2.6. It's now available through Amazon and Packet Publishing, and I'm sure elsewhere you can find it. So don't forget about that. And I'll try to put links down in the video description if you want to try to order it. It would be wonderful. So with that, guys, if you have any questions or need anything, don't hesitate to give me a call or reach out to us. You can go to our website at www.egisassociates.com. Call us at 678-710-9710 or shoot us an email at info@egisassociates.com. So with that, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, tell your buddies about us. If you want to know when we get new videos published and whatnot, make sure to hit the notifications bell there. If you did like the video, found it helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. In either case, try to leave some comments. If there's any other topics you'd like to see going forward and whatnot, please let me know. And with that, guys, we'll see you in the next video.